I remember the moment everything shifted for me. I was experiencing a body practice, tuning into my body. And I felt a sense of release and letting go. And in that moment, everything shifted. Everything that I ever learned about anatomy was wrong. Now, it just didn't happen that way. I had been learning about a new approach to anatomy. This was 20 years ago. My journey shifted. Before then, I was obsessed with fitness, anything to do with shaping my body, working individual muscles. And yeah, I was obsessed with it. Hey, it's Yasmin here at Soma Sensing. I just want to share this journey in the hope that you too can find your sense of wholeness, that there is a much simpler way of connecting to our body as a whole. And that's where we're heading to in this lesson, in this video. So when I started out in the fitness industry, we had learned anatomy as one system of our entire biology, the musculoskeletal system, which had to do with movement and fitness in particular. We learned individual muscles, the bones of the body, how many vertebrae that we had in our body, what they did, their function, how individual muscles, so for example, a bicep had an origin where it originated and an insertion, and if we moved it, there was a contraction. Okay, that's how I had learned anatomy. And then about 20 years ago, I was training in clinical Pilates with Polestar Pilates in the UK. And we were introduced to a form of anatomy called myofascia, where muscle and fascia were not separate, they were integrated. And the person that introduced us to this anatomy was Thomas Myers. He had written a book called Anatomy Trains, and for the first time, he was talking about how there are no individual muscles. Everything is connected to everything. So that's where the journey began. And to experience this integration, interconnectedness, we were introduced to somatic movement practices like Feldenkrais, Bartenieff principles, the Traeger approach, and my mentor, my educator for Polestar, was really curious, right? She would go off and bring these practices to us. So we were very lucky to have her. And before then, I had no clue about body sensation and how to tune into my body and listen to my body. I was just interested in how do I tone this particular area of my body. And so that's where the journey began. We were introduced to fascial anatomy, myofascia at the time. And in Thomas Myers' anatomy trains, he was giving us this idea that when you move, you're not just moving one part. There's an integration. And he introduced us to myofascial slings. So there was kind of the front of the body, the back of the body, how it moved in one. There was the particular slings of the spiral line, so how spiral motion emerged, or how everything connected from the base of the neck across the body to the foot. The part that really intrigued me, because I was training in Pilates and we had learned that there were this core of the body, right? The pelvic floor. There was a band of tissue or myofascia called the transversus abdominis, which was the deepest layer. So we were talking about these layers. And along the spine, there were the deepest muscles called the multifidus. So I want to come to Thomas Myers. The part that made me connect to my inner body and inner body sensation was what he called the deep front line, this three-dimensional core of the body, from the arch of the foot to the tongue, which integrated the inner thigh, the pelvic floor, the psoas, muscle called the psoas, and continued through to the heart and the lungs, the throat, and the tongue, right? And so he introduced people like us in the Pilates, in clinical Pilates, to this deep front line, this core that wasn't a separate, area of the trunk, but that there was this inner part of the three-dimensional part of the, I'm still talking about parts. So that's where it began. And there was a moment that happened. Now, what would happen when we had people arrive? The stress response would mean we experienced restriction in the body, people who would have back pain or breathing issues, right? So one of the areas that we really struggled with to release was the diaphragm of the body, this area that became stuck. And one of the practices would be to soften, to release, to just allow that diaphragm to let go. So that was what I was kind of tuning into in my own body. And then I felt it, this moment of letting go. And in that moment, everything shifted. So I was in standing, kind of just figuring out this, deep core of the body at the time. There is, by the way, there is no separate core in the body. And there was this letting go. So it was a letting go. I was in standing. And the sense of ease and inner ease arising. And what I felt is that the body was held, that I didn't need to be pulling in anything or aligning anything, that when I was releasing the strain or the restriction somewhere, everything just felt effortless. And in that moment, it wasn't just the structure that shifted, my entire way of being shifted. And that's where the journey began with this practice I call soma sensing, and I call soma sensing, was in that moment. And in that moment, I stopped cueing core stability and so on. And that was 20 years ago. We were one of the first in the Pilates community in the UK talking about the core. It was very new. And up to today, we're still engaging the core. And I'm saying, no, we need to stop. Because these pioneers in helping us to understand anatomy, Thomas Myers being the first one that I was introduced to, and I'm really fortunate that I had my somatic practice, and I decided to go down the somatic path because there was that moment, an inner knowing, what I call an inner knowing. You just know. It felt right. Everything else felt wrong. And that's what soma sensing guides you to, that inner knowing. It's beyond your mind. So going from learning one system of the body, the musculoskeletal system, to getting to understand our anatomy of wholeness is through our body's fascia. So fascia is the stuff that everything is formed from in the body. All our systems in the body are formed within this fascial web. It's a web, it's one continuous fabric. And that moment shifted everything, that felt sense of anatomy, that felt sense of our fascia as one fabric, that it has a sensory nature. So when you have stiffness and strain in your body, it's not your muscles, it is your fascia. What I then learned during that time with Thomas Myers. So Thomas Myers was the person that we learned from 20 years ago. He introduced us to the work of Stephen Levin. Stephen Levin is an orthopedic surgeon, and he introduces the way this soft matter of fascia forms our body. And taking Thomas Myers' kind of deep front line, where I was working with this inner core of the body, what Stephen Levin introduced us to was that we don't need to be stacking the body in a two-dimensional structure. So we had learned to align everything, right? The spine, one block on top of the other. We were looking at posture in musculoskeletal anatomy, where everything, look at my body's changing right now as I'm talking to you, align everything, and kind of be stuck in that structure and always think that we need to be in good posture. Well, I'm telling you that you don't. The opposite of that is what Stephen Levin's work was introducing, that our body is already held by forces that are internal. We have internal forces that are pushing outward and inward, that's holding our body in this form, independent of gravity. So if you're kind of sitting at ease and you think you're slouching, you're not slouching. I'm sitting here and I'm just sitting in a way that's most easeful. If I feel a little bit of strain like I am now in my leg, I might move it to find less strain in my body. And Stephen Levin's approach to the body as a tensegrity means that there are forces pushing out and forces pushing in, that's holding this body in a shape that's more round and three-dimensional. The most important part of the shift from stacking the spine, one block on top of the other in a linear fashion, that we have volume. So Stephen Levin introduced us to volume, this third dimension. And if all of this is sounding a little bit like, I don't get it, it's okay. You will when you come to the somatic way of just sitting in the most easeful way for you. Don't worry about posture. The one takeaway from this is, with Stephen Levin's work, is everything is already held. It's already pre-tensioned. Our body as a structure is already held. Our bones float within our body. They're not held upright. They are actually part of an entire web. And they're just held there. What gives us strain and in our structure is restriction in this fascial kind of web. So maybe I need to explain a little bit about what fascia is, right? So fascia is the stuff that shapes our body. Now, if you want to understand it, instead of going to looking at it as it is in our body right now, we can have a better understanding of it when we look at how we form. We go to the embryo stage of life. So someone else that Thomas Myers introduced us to was Jaap van der Waal, who looks at fascia at the embryo stage. So we have Stephen Levin, who explores structure. He now calls tensegrity biotensegrity, the way living systems are held in a geometrical shape. In fact, all living systems in nature are held in this blueprint. There's a blueprint of structure. Okay, coming back to embryology. So if you want to know fascia, we go to the work of Jaap van der Waal. At embryo stage, when we are developing, even before any system has formed in our body, our nervous system, our circulatory system, we are a blob of gel. That's what we are. The embryo is kind of a blob of gel with cells within this gel. Every cell in the body starts off as stem cells. So there's this embryo, just think of cells coming together to form an embryo. The egg and the sperm come together, forms a cell. We are cells in a gel, stem cells in this gel. The gel is important. The gel is called mesenchyme, and that's how fascia begins, as a gel. One of those stem cells becomes a fibroblast cell that starts to form the fascial system. A fibroblast cell produces collagen and elastin. And we're also learning about a new type of cell that the work of Carla Stecco, who's another fascia researcher. Carla Stecco is absolutely amazing fascia researcher. She's talking about another type of cell that's actually producing the gel continuously, right? So we're a living system. We're a living system of nature. We self-organize. So from the embryo stage, there's a blueprint within our body. We are self-organizing. This embryo is self-organizing. It is moving even before the nervous system develops, right? It's already moving. And it's this movement and this information of movement that's happening that begins this process of self-assembling us. Those stem cells become blood cells. They become our organs, our nervous system. We talk about the lymphatic system, and the immune system are our immune cells that live within this gel. And fascia, when the cell that produces collagen starts to form, this is where this web-like structure happens. So every organ in your body is shaped by fascia. It interpenetrates everything. We become this one entire web. And what is so remarkable about this web is that it's super sensitive. So not only are there nerve endings within this web, so our nervous system is intertwined, fascia becomes this largest sensing organ of the body. Remember how our body's already moving even before the nervous system develops. And that's because there is an electromagnetic or electrical part to our body. We are energy. So apart from the nervous system, even before the nervous system forms, there is an energetic part to us that is there always. And it's this interaction of our energetic self. So if we really had to simplify the whole, we are energy, vibrating, oscillating, resonating, and finding these frequency. And based on our frequency, what's happening for us, the sensations that we experience. So we are super sensing. Fascia is super sensory. We're sensing all the time from moment to moment. Our body is attuning all the time. So attuning, think of frequency like a radio station. Attuning, when you hear the crackling, means that the body's at a different frequency. Different processes will be happening in the body at once at a frequency that might give us an autoimmune response, right? So all of this information is being processed all at once. And based on the information that is happening in that moment, this exchange of information is what keeps us alive. And understanding how we process information. And there's been the introduction of vagal tone and the vagus nerve. It's all integrated, all connected. And to get to the heart of what makes us feel vibrant, energetic, feel good, it's It's that frequency. It's when we are in a particular state. And the way we can shift our state is the somatic way, tuning into our body sensation. And that's really what soma sensing is. We learn how to tune into our body sensation through fascia as our fabric of embodiment. So I hope that's helped you to understand a little more how to take something that's so complex and connect with it through your felt sense. And that's what I will be sharing with you on this channel. And also, if you want to really dive deep into it, I do have a course. I'll put the link in below. You can access that course. And if you want to nerd out and go into the details, you can find it there.